"We need to take this to Mr. Ade," Amina suggested. They carefully documented everything they found and hurried back upstairs. As they were about to leave, the new janitor appeared again. This time he looked frantic. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered. "They are watching." Before they could react, the lights went out, plunging them into darkness. They heard whispers, felt cold hands brushing against them. Hello everybody! Welcome to the second episode of this captivating story. Grab your popcorn, make yourself comfortable, and let's dive in. The ride begins. This is what happened so far. Previously on Chidinma's story, our young heroine experienced an unusual and eerie day at school. Her parents, busy with work, accidentally left her at school, leading her to face strange and unsettling events throughout the night. Her parents, upon realizing their mistake, returned to the school for a frantic and unnerving search, experiencing supernatural phenomena themselves. Chidinma was found the next morning by a kind woman named Aisha. Determined to uncover the truth behind the strange occurrences, Chidinma, her parents and her friends visited a village where the elders revealed that ancient spirits were restless. They performed a ritual to pacify the spirits and returned home, believing they had resolved the issue. However, the mystery of the school's dark secrets lingered, suggesting their journey was far from over. The days following the ritual were surprisingly calm. Chidinma attended school, her friends by her side, and for a while it seemed like the worst was over. The air of normalcy returned, but there was an undercurrent of tension that none of them could quite shake. One morning, as Chidinma was getting ready for school, Nana and Ubina sat her down. "We need to talk, Chidinma," Nana began. "We know things have been strange, but we want you to be very careful. Report anything suspiciously immediately." Chidinma nodded solemnly. "I will, Mama. I promise." Back at school, Chidinma, Amina and Bayo continued to keep a close eye on their surroundings. During recess, they decided to explore the schoolyard, looking for any signs they might have missed. As they walked around, they noticed a new janitor. He was an older man with a distant look in his eyes. When Chidinma approached him, he seemed startled. "Hello, sir," Chidinma said politely. "Have you seen anything strange around here?" The janitor's eyes flickered with recognition and fear. "You should be careful, little one. There are things in the school that are better left alone." Before Chidinma could ask more, the janitor hurried away, leaving the children even more curious. That afternoon, Mr. Ade called Chidinma and her friends to his office. He looked wary but determined. "I've been doing some research," Mr. Ade said. "There are records of other incidents at this school, incidents that have been covered up. I found an old map that shows a hidden room beneath the school. I believe this room holds the key to understanding what's happening." He handed them the map, and Chidinma's heart raced with excitement and fear. They agreed to meet after school to investigate. As the last bell rang, Chidinma, Amina and Bayo snuck into the basement, using the map to guide them. The air grew colder with each step, and their flashlights flickered ominously. They finally found the entrance to the hidden room, a door concealed behind a stack of old furniture. With a creak, the door opened, revealing a room filled with ancient artifacts, old documents, and strange symbols etched into the walls. "This place gives me the creeps," Bayo muttered. Chidinma's eyes were drawn to a dusty old book lying on a pedestal. She opened it and found detailed accounts of rituals, hauntings, and a dark history that dated back centuries. "We need to take this to Mr. Ade," Amina suggested. They carefully documented everything they found and hurried back upstairs. As they were about to leave, the new janitor appeared again. This time he looked frantic. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered. "They are watching." Before they could react, the lights went out, plunging them into darkness. They heard whispers, felt cold hands brushing against them. Panic set in, and they ran, guided only by their flashlights. Once outside, they caught their breath and looked back at the school. Buildings seemed to loom larger, more menacing. "We need to tell Mr. Ade," Chidinma said, her voice shaking. Back in Mr. Ade's office, Chidinma, Amina and Bayo laid out the evidence they had found. Amina couldn't hold back her tears. "We have to tell the police," she cried. Mr. Ade shook his head gravely. "I recently learned something disturbing about the highest head of the police department. He and his family once profited from the ancient injustice and cruelties that took place here. He owes his current powerful position and influence throughout the city to this dark time. Unfortunately, no help is to be expected from the highest police authority." Chidinma and her friends stared at Mr. Ade, horrified. "What do you mean, sir?" Chidinma asked, her voice trembling. Mr. Ade sighed. "The head of the police department has a vested interest in keeping these secrets buried. If this dark history comes to light, it could ruin him. That's why every attempt to investigate has been met with resistance and ridicule." Bayo clenched his fists. "So what do we do now? We can't just ignore this." Mr. Ade looked at the children with determination. "We must be careful and gather irrefutable evidence. We need to expose the truth in a way that can't be dismissed or covered up." Chidinma, Amina and Bayo spent the next few days working with Mr. Ade. They scanned the old documents, catalogued the artifacts, and compiled their findings into a comprehensive report. Mr. Ade reached out to trusted journalists who had a history of exposing corruption. "We'll need to present this to someone who can help us without being influenced by the police chief," Mr. Ade explained. "I have contacted a few journalists who might be able to assist." One evening, as they were working late in the school's library, Chidinma noticed something strange. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of symbols on an old map. "What is it?" Amina asked, leaning in for a closer look. "These symbols match the ones we found in the hidden room," Chidinma said. "I think there's more to this map than we realize." The map led them to an old, unused part of the school. With trepidation, they moved a heavy bookshelf aside, revealing a narrow passageway. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. "This must lead to the old community center," Mr. Ade said, his voice echoing in the confined space. They followed the passage, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the bowels of the school. Finally, they emerged into a large underground chamber. "This is it," Chidinma whispered. "This is where it all happened." The chamber was filled with remnants of a dark past. Chains hung from the walls, and the floor was stained with old, dried blood. The air was thick with the weight of countless suffering souls. As they explored the chamber, they found more evidence of the atrocities that had taken place. Old ledgers detailed the names of children who had suffered, and photographs captured their anguished faces. "We need to get all of this to the journalists," Mr. Ade said, his voice filled with resolve. "This is the proof we need." But as they prepared to leave, they heard footsteps approaching. Panic set in as they realized they had been followed. "Hide!" Chidinma whispered urgently. They ducked behind some old crates, holding their breath, as the footsteps grew louder. The new janitor appeared, his face twisted in anger. "You think you can expose the truth?" he sneered. "You'll never leave this place alive." Mr. Ade stepped out from behind the crates, his hands raised. "We don't want any trouble. We just want the truth to come out." The janitor laughed bitterly. "The truth? The truth is that this school and this city are built on a foundation of lies and blood. You think you can change that?" "We have to try," Chidinma said, stepping forward bravely. "We owe it to all those who suffered." The janitor's expression softened for a moment, but then hardened again. "You're too late. The spirits have already awakened. They won't rest until they've had their revenge." Before they could react, the janitor lunged at them. Mr. Ade fought back, giving Chidinma and her friends a chance to escape. "Run!" he shouted. "Get out of here!" Chidinma, Amina and Bayo ran through the dark passage, their hearts pounding in their chests. They could hear the sounds of struggle behind them, but they couldn't stop. "We need to get to the journalists," Bayo said, his voice breathless. "They're our only hope." They burst out of the passage and into the night, racing towards the meeting place Mr. Ade had arranged with the journalists. As they ran, they prayed that Mr. Ade would be okay. At the meeting place, the children found a man sitting quietly in a dimly lit room. The air was thick with tension. "Are you Ifeoma?" Chidinma asked hesitantly. The man shook his head. "No, I'm not Ifeoma. My name is Emeka. Ifeoma couldn't make it. She sent me instead." Bayo's face fell. "But we need someone who can help us expose the truth." Emeka looked at them with sad eyes. "Unfortunately, you are too late with your evidence. I no longer work as a journalist. I had to give up my job. It's been a long time since I was allowed to report the truth. The influence of the highest police authority has affected my work. I have often been put down in the past and portrayed as ridiculous, incompetent, and even a liar. It got to the point where nobody believed me anymore, and I had to close my publishing house. That's why I stopped working as a journalist." Amina's eyes filled with tears. "But there must still be a way. We have all this evidence. We can't just give up." Emeka sighed deeply. "I admire your determination, but it's not that simple. The people you're up against are very powerful. They can ruin lives." Chidinma stepped forward, her voice steady. We know it's dangerous, but we can't let them get away with this. Those children deserve justice. Emeka looked at her, seeing the fire in her eyes. He nodded slowly. All right, I'll help you. But we need to be very careful. We'll need to gather even more evidence and make sure it's watertight. We'll need to find people who can corroborate your story. With Emeka's help, Chidinma and her friends continued their investigation. They knew they needed a strategic approach to gather more evidence and support. They decided to mobilize a network of allies who could help them uncover the truth and bring it to light. Chidinma, Amina and Bayo began by reaching out to former teachers, staff and students who had witnessed strange events and injustices at the school. They created a list of potential contacts, people who had either experienced or seen the supernatural occurrences and injustices firsthand. Chidinma and her friends spent hours on the phone, contacting these individuals and arranging meetings to hear their stories. They recorded interviews, took detailed notes, and collected any physical evidence that these witnesses could provide. Emeka suggested involving community leaders who had influence and could lend credibility to their cause. The children at Emeka met with local activists, religious leaders, and neighborhood watch groups. They shared their findings and appealed to their sense of justice. One evening, they met with Pastor Michael, a respected community leader who had a reputation for standing up against corruption. As they presented their evidence, Pastor Michael listened intently, his face growing more serious with each passing minute. "This is deeply troubling," Pastor Michael said. "I will rally the community and ensure that your voices are heard. We cannot allow such injustices to continue." Emeka used his connections to reach out to journalists who were known for their integrity and willingness to expose corruption. He arranged meetings with reporters who had a history of investigating and reporting on sensitive issues. One such journalist was Ada, a fearless reporter who had exposed several major scandals in the past. Emeka set up a meeting with her, and the children presented their findings. Ada reviewed the evidence carefully. "This is a compelling story," she said. "I will do everything in my power to ensure that it gets the coverage it deserves. But we need to be prepared for pushback. The people involved in this are powerful and will do anything to protect their secrets." Realizing that they needed legal backing, Chidinma and her friends sought out lawyers who specialized in human rights and anti-corruption cases. They met with a legal team that was willing to take on their case pro bono, understanding the significance of what they were uncovering. Attorney Ifeoma, a passionate human rights lawyer, took a particular interest in their case. "We need to build a solid legal case," she explained. "We will gather all the evidence, testimonies and documents, and we will prepare to present this in court if necessary." Emeka also suggested creating a secure online platform to document and share their findings. They worked with a group of tech-savvy volunteers to build a website where they could upload evidence, testimonies, and updates about their investigation. This would ensure that even if physical documents were destroyed or confiscated, their findings would still be accessible to the public. The website quickly gained attention, with people from all over the city visiting to learn about the dark history of the school. Anonymous tips and additional testimonies started pouring in, further strengthening their case. Meanwhile, strange things continued to happen at the school. Lights flickered, Shadows moved on their own, and students reported hearing whispers in empty hallways. The atmosphere grew tenser with each passing day. Chidinma and her friends knew that the ritual they had performed had only been the beginning. They needed to find a way to truly lay the spirits to rest. One evening, Emeka received a tip from a trusted source. The source claimed to have information that could blow the case wide open. Emeka arranged a meeting, but he insisted that Chidinma and her friends stay behind for their safety. As they waited anxiously for Emeka's return, they couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Hours passed, and there was still no word from Emeka. Chidinma's anxiety grew. "We need to find him," she said, determination in her voice. Chidinma, Amina and Bayo set out to find Emeka. They retraced his steps, finally arriving at a deserted warehouse. The air was thick with tension as they entered the dark building. Inside, they found Emeka tied up and surrounded by menacing figures. The new janitor was there, his face twisted in anger. "You think you can stop us?" The janitor sneered. "You have no idea what you are up against." Chidinma stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. "We are not afraid of you. We will expose the truth." With a burst of courage, Chidinma and her friends rushed at the men, using the element of surprise to their advantage. They managed to free Emeka, and together they fought their way out of the warehouse. With Emeka safe, they returned to the school, determined to finish what they had started. They gathered all their evidence and prepared to present it to the world. Emeka contacted his old contacts in the media, and they arranged a press conference. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. As Chidinma stood before the cameras, she felt a surge of determination. "We have uncovered a dark secret that haunted this school for decades," she began. "Today, we bring the truth to light." The evidence was presented and the testimonies were heard. The story spread like wildfire, and the city was in an uproar. The highest authorities in the city could no longer ignore the truth. Investigations were launched, and those responsible for the injustices were held accountable. The spirits of the children who had suffered finally found peace. Chidinma, her friends and their families were hailed as heroes. But they knew that their journey was far from over. The forces they had awakened were powerful, and the battle for justice had just begun. As they walked to school, Chidinma felt a chill run down her spine. She turned and saw the new janitor standing in the shadows, his expression unreadable. "We did it," Bayo said, trying to sound confident. "We exposed the truth." "But at what cost?" Amida wondered aloud. Chidinma nodded. "This is just the beginning. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." As they entered the school, Chidinma felt a sense of foreboding. The dark secret that tied the past to the present was still a mystery, and they knew that their journey was far from over. The forces they had awakened were powerful, and the battle for justice had just begun. Thank you for watching the story. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you won't miss any of the upcoming stories, and stay tuned for the next episode of Chidinma's adventures. And let me know in the comments, what do you think is the dark secret that ties the past to the present and is still undiscovered? What do you think is next for Chidinma and her friends? Have you ever experienced something similar? I will be happy to hear from you and enter in a conversation with you. See you in the next story. Bye bye.